My name is Christophe Volkert from the Belgian Farmers Union, Boerenbond. A question to Mr. Andy Deo. Why RAP is not targeting agricultural sector?
The reason we're not yet tackling the agricultural sector is probably twofold. First of all, we see, as I presented, that the most substantial amount of waste occurs within the home. And I think the second element is RAP, as yet, does not have a remit in that area. Within the UK, there is the Environment Agency and other agencies who are actively operating within the agricultural sector. We totally recognise that this is an area of significant losses and a great opportunity, and we are actively working with other colleagues in the UK, and I've just been having discussions with Tristram Stewart in terms of other actions which may be undertaken in that area as well. But as yet, we don't have the remit to operate in that area.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. I'm Michel Asherif from Chad. I was very impressed by the presentations which were given, and I'm very interested in the research results which have been obtained, and I would agree to those. My concerns are elsewhere. You looked at the different regions of the world and losses there in terms of Africa, Chad in particular. There's no loss, or virtually no loss, at the level of consumption. But because we have a climate problem, it's quite dry. We don't have a climate problem, it's quite dry. We don't lose much in terms of storage. But we would like to have more research on post-harvest losses and consumption, but we need to also look at pollution of cereals. We face three different phenomena. Pollution in the fields is a huge problem. Carnivorous birds can destroy up to 100% of our crops. So whether you've got post-harvest loss policy or not, it makes no difference in those cases. It's a very serious problem. The birds come from 300 kilometers away, they destroy the crop and then they leave again, so there's nothing we can do about it. Now, the farmers do their best to protect their crops, but they aren't able to. That's one problem. And there's a particular problem in Central Africa with land which has been used for a long time, maize, sorghum and another crop which have been produced. The land has been impoverished over many years. That's the second problem. The same crops have been grown. Now we're looking at resistant varieties of manioc, and so far that's very interesting for the south of Chad, but there are a couple of problems there. The length of time it takes to get the tubers, up to 16 months, and we need research in replanting the crops. And then we also have animals eating the young crops. Now, I don't want to monopolize the floor here. There is some research being done, but we do need to look at this problem on the ground if we want to find a durable solution to this problem. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. I've been attending CTA Brussels briefings since 2007, and I think this one is really excellent and urgent. I want to link two interventions, the one of John Ockert from NRI and Andy Doe. Andy Doe, you said that one of the interventions is keep what is bought at its best. And one of the issues here is repackaging, or better, resealing or reclosing containers. Is there not an urgent need for connecting European researchers and African researchers on this issue? And I give you one example. I am funded by European Commission on a platform called Platform for African-European Partnerships on Agricultural Research for Development. And we have been given the opportunity to connect German researchers with Belgian researchers and with Ghanaian researchers on a crucial issue, which is the three-layer plastic bags, which is used for packaging cowpeas, which is used for packaging maize. But the problem is we, of course, have that plastic packaging, but then you create another waste source, massive. If you go to Accra, it's congested with plastic bags because everybody's drinking water out of the plastic bags. So there is a Flemish consortium in Belgium with the industry and academics, which is called Pack for Food. And they try to find a key problem or a solution to a key problem, which is it's not the biodegradable plastic bag only, it's the resealing which is a problem. Because it is very difficult to find a resealing technology which is strong enough, which would be biodegradable. So my question is, for both of you, is we definitely need to have very good collaboration among researchers, but if you have not that brokerage, what I see now is we work beside one another. The Germans are doing their studies, the Ghanaians are trying their best to do their studies, and if you have no broker going between, trying to demonstrate we are on the same issues, we still face like turning in circles.
I'd like to address perhaps both questions, if I may. I think both of them highlight the fact that there's a need for collaborative research at all different stages of the cycle of, if you like, food production. Certainly, as highlighted by the first speaker, there's lots to be done in terms of controlling birds, swarms, tackling poor quality soils, and obviously cassava storage, and etc. A lot of research has been done. One of the problems is finding the means and mechanisms to actually take that research and get it used in the field. What are the key mechanisms? Is it through a public sector approach? Or is it public-private sector, or is it purely private sector? The level of investment is still not there to support both technology development and uptake at the scale that's required. I think also that highlights a problem where we want to take knowledge, for instance, from German, European scientists. It's how we use that knowledge and adapt it with local partnerships in the south. It doesn't matter whether it's packaging, controlling post-harvest losses. The technology is not necessarily the problem, but it's the mechanisms, the institutions locally that are key to making sure that we can use these new innovations or existing innovations, and how we understand the role of investment in making these technologies available. Who's going to take on that investment? Is it the private or is it the public sector?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. I'm Elisabetta Tangana, and I'm president of the Pan-African Farmers Organization. I'd like to congratulate this morning's speakers, but I would like to pick up on the fact that as an African, our vision of the question of harvest loss hasn't really been tackled in terms of access to infrastructures, because we believe that harvest loss in Africa also arises from difficulty in getting the products to market. We produce, maybe not a lot, but the little that we do produce doesn't reach markets often because of a lack of infrastructure. Transport, communications infrastructure. And that means that this is also an issue of development to allow populations to produce and to transport their production to the market. The second problem is technology transfer. Often, we just need very small technology, simple technologies which might allow women to process the harvest they have, to ensure food security for villages, but also so that they can put their produce on the market and ensure quality to consumers. So we just need small-scale technology. It might not be very difficult or very complicated, but there is a need for political will here to make them available. And I would stress that we do need this political will to ensure development to reduce post-harvest losses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paolo Teru. I'm the Samoan ambassador based here in Brussels. My intervention is firstly a pointed intervention, and then secondly perhaps an observation in the context of my region, the Pacific. I'd like to perhaps ask the FAO representative, in his presentation, he labeled North America and Oceania together. And I want to know the reason for that. Secondly, I wonder whether that classification was primarily to include Australia and New Zealand, and whether the Pacific Islands are included in Oceania. And thirdly, if not, what was the reason for that? Because I understand that you have a sub-regional office in Apia, the capital of my country. So that should provide you with ample opportunity in terms of data. The second point I wish to make, Mr. Chairman, relates to the issue of natural disasters. My regions are prone to natural disasters, cyclones, tsunamis, and I wonder whether that also impacts. I know it does impact in terms of the food chain, but I haven't heard anything mentioned to that extent. And when you consider very small island countries, its impact is devastating. And we're primarily agriculture in nature. So that impacts quite significantly in terms of the food chain in our countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm Onya Konopesa from Eastern Africa Farmers Federation. There is some observation I've made here that usually when we come for a forum like this one, targeting a specific activity, it draws in other partners or other issues. I was looking at the presentation of Dr. John Orchard and Professor Rick Hodges, who are looking at widening distribution. But I think when we look at widening distribution of food and whatever, it brings in the issue of infrastructure development. That means roads and bridges and so forth. And that one is very, very common in Africa, especially in Eastern Africa, but I believe other parts of Africa also. That you can have food in one place, plenty of food, but it cannot reach the other region. Even if they have a disaster, it cannot reach because there are no roads. Or if the roads are there, they are so bad that nobody wants to risk his vehicle to take food to such places. So in essence, you are feeding very well on one side, and the other side of the country is starving because of infrastructure. So I don't know whether among the strategies which they were developing, they were also including an aspect of bringing partners to help their develop infrastructure. I'm very happy here we have ambassadors. I think that is one area they have really to look at. Sometimes even the technology we use is poor. You take fellows to make a bridge, they make a bridge when water, there's heavy rain, the bridge is washed off. So actually again there is an aspect of poor technology also. So can we see how we can integrate issues when we're discussing food losses in Africa? Thank you very much.
Merci. Je réponds au nom de Bizimong Alexis. Je suis
Thank you.
à l'ambassade du Burundi à Bruxelles.
I'm from the Burundi embassy in Brussels. I have a question on the program for assessing post-harvest losses of cereals in Africa by crop, by country and by province. I'd like to know if particular criteria were used in choosing the countries which are part of this program. And could you brief us on how one might join this program? Because I've looked carefully at the document which was made available, and I found that Burundi, my country, is not part of the group of countries covered by this assessment program. It's not part of the West African countries, the East African countries rather, covered. Now, we do want to look towards regional integration, and from that point of view, I was surprised to note that my country was not present. So I wanted to know if it would be impossible for my country to be included in this cereal loss evaluation program. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you all for these highly interesting questions. I would like to start with Madame, who raised the first question. Sorry, I've forgotten which country you were referring to. Cameroon. Okay, yeah. Well, the problems that you described are definitely very pertinent and real. The way that we approach it in tackling these problems to reduce the losses is indeed make sure that we take a look at the whole food supply chain from beginning to the end. Indeed, if there is no access to the market, there is no point, not much point in bringing in improved technology for grain storage, which will reduce the loss at the farmer level. But if then still the farmer cannot get the product to the market, you only postpone the loss. And therefore, it is in the new strategy that we apply now very important to consider the whole food supply chain and its efficiency. Now, in general, development organizations like the FAO and private partners, they cannot really solve the problem at a nationwide scale. The problems in the food supply chain have to be implemented by the people whom those problems affect, which are the stakeholders in the supply chain. The farmers, the transporters, the processors, the traders. They have to implement the solutions, and it is the role of the national governments and the development organizations and other support partners to create the enabling environment which makes it possible for these stakeholders to implement these solutions, to create a good environment that makes investments possible, that makes, for instance, possible for stakeholders to get finance on credit or by any other means, so that they are able to implement it, and to provide training to the stakeholders so that they are capacitated in implementing these solutions. That is the approach that we need to take. And indeed, it is very well true. There is a political will necessary to do this. And I'm sorry to hear that, in your view, in Cameroon, this is lacking at the moment. And therefore, we as Food and Agriculture Organization, as much as possible, discuss these issues at national government level in order to promote the strategy that I just explained. Now let me go to Samoa. I've been very lucky to live in Tonga and a few other islands for 2 years. And I will explain to you in the survey, in the study that you did on global food losses and food waste, how we divided the world in 7 regions. This was for practical purposes, and in this respect, we put, in order not to have too many regions, we've put North America and Australia and New Zealand together. Maybe it is not very correct to call it Oceania, because Oceania is more than Australia and New Zealand. And honestly, I must admit, we excluded the Pacific Islands from this survey. The reason is that we wanted to get a good and quick overview of the magnitude of the problem of food losses and their main causes. And in this respect, the small island states, not only in the Pacific, also in the Caribbean, are, in terms of quantity, not significant for that reason. That doesn't take away that we, in our program to go for solutions, to implement solutions to the post-harvest, to the food losses and food waste, we will take a worldwide approach, and also will include the Pacific Islands and the Caribbean island states. But there is, of course, a strong point, because the problems that occur in these small island states are typically very different than they occur in other countries on the continents. For instance, I'd like to give one example. You mentioned natural disasters in Samoa. Probably you are mainly referring to cyclones. Indeed, I know that that can be devastating for the whole crop. It's interesting that that time when I was there in the Solomon Islands, there were people telling me that it is the abundance of food aid, especially coming from Australia and maybe the United States, but especially from Australia, that is coming to these islands, is killing off the national traditional resistance against such natural disasters. When a cyclone hits the Solomon Islands, the whole harvest may get lost, or at least for a big deal. And the islands are relatively small, and a few ships with grain will solve the problem for that season. These persons who are telling me say, because of this thing, our farmers within a few years, within one generation, lose their traditional skills and capacity to handle this type of natural disasters. Cyclones have been there for thousands and thousands of years, and traditionally the people know very well when they come, what to do, and how to deal with it. However, if you flood the country then with a few shiploads of grain, nobody bothers anymore to protect this crop or to handle it properly, and because the food aid is coming anyway. If then at a later stage, for whatever reason, political, food aid is not coming anymore, then there is a real disaster when the cyclone hits. So indeed, as developing organizations, we have to be very careful in our approach. And just as I said in the previous case, it is a matter of tackling the food supply chain, capacity building of the stakeholders so that they can implement their own solutions to solve the problems instead of dumping solutions on top of them which they can't handle themselves. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to repeat what was said earlier, that infrastructure is a key factor in any food supply chain, and particularly the 4 to 10 kilometre of feeder roads that lead to the main road is one of the key areas where actually investment by governments and donors should take place. But equally, the cost of transport. There's a lot of taxes and hidden costs in transporting food from one part of the country to another, to the extent that, for instance, rice farmers in northern parts of Ghana can't afford to compete with rice that's imported into Accra. So, you know, just simple problems like that. And of course, technologies, if they are made available, would have a big impact. For instance, if we find that in Kenya, if the private sector can provide simple maize dehullers, it frees women and men farmers from a lot of work and provides a service that they can pay for to improve quality and marketing of their product. Just to come on to the point about the inclusion of countries in the AFLIS project, when the project was set up, there was a small amount of money, if you like, to test the process purely in East and Southern Africa. But now that the project is expanding, I'm sure that my colleagues would like to include as many countries as possible. So if I can have contact details, I will make sure that they talk to the right people. So sure, we try and include as many as possible, assuming we have the funds from our EC colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishmael, and many thanks to the presenters for this information provided. My name is Komla Bisi. I work with the African Union Commission with the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program initiative. I must say that the presentations are very informing, and in the context of CADEP, which is a continental initiative by the African government to help member states increase investment into the agriculture sector. Food security related issues are very key in this context. You'll probably be aware that at the moment 30 countries within Africa have signed the compact to CADEP, and 22 of these countries have developed new investment plans, which is intended to help the member states to achieve higher economic growth in the context of agriculture development. Our recent analysis also shows that about 40% of the investment required broadly in the context of these investment plans are in the area of enhancing food security, of which food loss reduction related initiatives are critical. At the moment, we're working with FAO to help member states to also develop interventions targeted at post-harvest loss reduction and also reducing losses along the global food value chain. I'm making this intervention because I noticed that there is a lot of efforts and experiences across the globe. For example, the initiative by University of Greenwich, we will find very interesting to partner and also to bring this type of knowledge to our people. You also recall by the presentation made by FAO that food loss and waste related issues are not only a problem of Africa. And if you also refer back to the graph, you notice that different countries and of different parts of the world are at different levels in terms of losses. So it will be interesting also to identify how some of these other countries are able to reduce losses along the value chain, and also we will be happy to partner with you to unlock the knowledge in the context of Africa in the loss-related interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I, at this moment, invite the panelists to say a few words, maybe just 1 minute each, before we break off for tea. Starting from my right, if you wish to.
Okay. Many of the questions posed have been out of my area of knowledge in terms of highlighting the issues, particularly in Africa and indeed Samoa. I found it extremely enlightening to appreciate the different challenges which are faced in such nations. Whilst in the UK we have been very much focusing on the retailers and the food manufacturers, those in business, and indeed those consumers who waste so much. Clearly the problems in other countries are extremely different. They range from infrastructure to knowledge sharing to ensure that appropriate local technologies can be used. And my only other comment is in relation to the natural disasters. It's clear that cyclones can reap incredible damage, and with global warming we are only likely to see more of those in more areas. So reducing food waste in every part of the world helps to mitigate climate change and the risk that that poses in terms of future growth of food in the countries where it is currently grown and its potential destruction by those natural disasters.
No more parting words. Let me then make my own parting words in that case. To me, I think the presentation has been very informative, particularly as it is coming up with what I could consider to be a fairly comprehensive approach that is looking at losses along the entire chain. Hitherto, this moment, I think the focus is, rightly so, I believe, has been more on the post-harvest losses as they relate to the farm itself, which I think is where it belongs and should continue to belong before we move up the chain. In any case, everything starts with the farmer. So if we can control those losses at that starting point, we can also reduce the extent of waste that may happen up the value chain. I think the dimensions that have been came out of the presentations are very daunting in my view. There are a lot of contradictions. There are a lot of there's a dichotomy, and I think in many cases it's scandalous that we have a situation where people are dying for lack of food, and we have enormous amounts of food being thrown away. That contradiction is heavy to reconcile, and I think we should really think through this one very carefully. Otherwise, history may judge us fairly harshly in the future. Let's look at how we can at least make sure that we minimize the losses by transferring some of those potential losses of food, that is, to those who need it, regardless of how much it would cost to have that food moved. The causes are very, very comprehensively covered in the presentations. They range from production planning to even planning your diets, which is maybe the finer end of things, how to plan your diet. A luxury which those who are in developing countries may not have. So we have two dimensions here. One basic dimension of that you are going to eat, whatever is edible. And then we have another dimension up the end of the scale, which is looking at the finer bits, how you really plan it. Because maybe there's excessive supply, maybe there's excessive access. All these, if they are seen together, not as separate parts, maybe it will bring some soberness into the discussions and look at ways of how to at least using morality as a starting point, how to deal with this global phenomena. What is also a bit difficult to understand is the fact that most of those who produce the food, in any case, are not aware of the waste that occurs well after the production has taken place. If only they were aware of the extent of the food waste and food losses, I'm sure they would, that could start not only a debate, but perhaps a much more radical. It could trigger off radical maybe changes in how the whole food supply system is organized from the production up to the consumption. Some of the issues, of course, are policy related. So if policy is sorted out, taking into account the cost of and benefits of the policy, I think it could, in my view, deal to a very significant extent with the problem. So policy, of course, I think is a key element. We heard rather interestingly, which is true, that of course there are some birds and animals that have no respect for policy. But I'm sure we could look at ways of how policy can do the transboundary aspects of birds that go and cause food losses in areas that they don't generally reside in. The issue of research and development, again, is a key issue along the chain. But more importantly, in my view, maybe I've got my own biases coming from a producers' organization, more research and development in the post-harvest, immediate to the farmer, to the farming community, as well as we had from packaging or to the consumer upwards. But the point being that there is more research that is required. And in addition to that, there is more collaborative research that is needed. A lot of things appear to be happening and coordinated in different parts of maybe the same country, but between countries, between regions, and between continents. Efforts to harmonize research along the value chain to minimize these losses is going to be, I think, very, very useful. The solutions, of course, R&D, not only technical. I think it's important that R&D has to look at beyond technical aspects. It can also be around planning, because some of at least at the production level, some of the losses can be avoided by proper planning. If you are going to be feeding a market that is not ready to take that market, that produce, it may not necessarily be the best thing to do. So proper planning, which is then again backed by information. I think information becomes another key element in managing this problem. And it's a bit concerning also to hear that it's difficult getting information from the private sector, particularly the supermarkets, about the extent of the problem. We need to look at ways of how to unlock that information, because that information is important for planning and for strategizing on how to deal with the problem. So we call upon those who in the private sector, particularly the supermarkets, to work with us in order to assist each other in addressing the problem. Then finally, I think, as I said earlier on, everything starts with the farmer. Everything starts from production. And whenever production is competing with other value chain activities, it tends to be dwarfed. And now that the debate is talking about value chain losses, my concern personally would be that it should not take away, again, the focus that is critical on the farm level issues. Yes, the other issues are important, but let's focus on where it starts from more, taking into account also the impacts on the rest of the value chains.